Good evening and welcome to the first show of Faith Simplified on Thursdays. You are going to join us and our guests as we engage in social teachings of the church, other issues that affect you day to day during the pandemic. What is the life of the church that you anticipate in the near future? Did you even think that COVID would last us this long?
Church.
Are you in love with the digital church? Does it engage you fully? Or you connect to mass whilst doing other things? Or you are itching to go back to the physical church? I am your host, Deborah Mashwe, and I am not alone. I've got guests that have joined me, members of the clergy and the laity. And since we had just celebrated Women's Month, we felt that Women's Month should not only be in August, but women should be respected throughout the year. So ladies, please introduce yourselves, starting from my right.
Well, good evening, everybody. I am Chavisi Leshandu, but people know me as Umashandu. Do you want to know which parish or I'm a Johannesburg?
Thank you. Don't you worry, because soon it will be you. Whether you're in KZN, whether you're in Mpumalanga, whether you're in the Northwest, anyone and everyone is welcome to join us. So we do encourage you to subscribe to our page, to like our page, share, comment, and probably send topics that you want us to engage you. Father.
Good evening to you and to your viewers. I'm Father Boshom Mbecheni, a Catholic priest of the Catholic Archdiocese of Johannesburg. I'm currently working in St. Albert the Great in Vosloorus, in the East Rand. Yes.
Thank you, Father. My dear, please introduce yourself.
I'm Oliswa Muraka, and I'm also a member of the Catholic Church in Johannesburg Diocese.
Padre.
Good evening. My name is Rampe Shobo. I'm a Jesuit priest based in Johannesburg and working mainly on migration issues and social justice issues that affect people's lives, as it were.
There you have it, the richness of our church. If you think priests are just priests on the altar, think again. And today, as we dissect and get into an appetizer of what is to follow, we will be discussing briefly the two elements of the social teachings and the life of a parish priest and the life of a parish. You are a Catholic that is sitting at home, that is itching to discuss certain issues, and you do not have a platform. Faith Simplified is your platform. Father,
Yes, but
2021. 2020 this year, we had hope that lockdown level 5 is going down, and we'll go back into normal lives. And we are sitting with the third wave.
yeah, obviously, actually, we had never even thought we would be in this situation. COVID-19 happened, and all systems and structures in the world were affected, especially in our context, also the church. I mean, the way we worship, the ordinary way was challenged. Obviously, a parish life, a family life was affected. All systems were affected. So it's a difficult time.
Mashan,
Yes,
do you still go to the physical church or are you connecting to the digital church?
a bit of both.
Oh, you guys are so blessed that you even have Radio Veritas, the good news for a change.
It's actually, we are spoiled for choice, but I should say nothing beats the community. Because listening on Veritas, you listen, you hear the word and you sing along to your favorite hymns and such, but there's just a missing element. There's also that socializing before and after Mass, which we are not having. And there's also Mass is not quite the same. Because how many of us actually sit during the time of Mass and go through all the steps of Mass? Or am I busy doing that? I'm ironing when I'm listening to Father Victor on Sunday, preparing for Monday, or if I'm listening to Father in the morning, am I cooking breakfast and doing such? It's just not the same. So can somewhere, wherever we need to do and get done, COVID will
Pray harder. Xoliswa, you probably have heard of spiritual communion. Act of spiritual communion. Act of spiritual communion versus the real body and blood of Christ. The essence, do you believe fully? Now maybe that still, when you've received the real body and blood of Christ, do you carry him like you've received him?
I think there's definitely a difference. So I don't know, spiritual communion, I've never participated. For me, it was like, it just, it just doesn't seem real, to be quite honest. And maybe it's lack of understanding on our side, is what exactly is that, is it just saying, I receive, and just accepting what's in Hilang Kon, so I'll be very honest with you and say I've never participated personally in spiritual communion because I don't understand what it is. And also from a physical perspective, for me, I think because of our faith and what we believe, it does indeed make a difference when you are receiving, because you believe that it is indeed the body and blood of Christ that you are receiving at that time. And to that extent, I think for me, I prefer the physical thing. I prefer the real thing than the spiritual what that I don't understand.
Oh yeah, interesting. And I'm sure the clergy joining us in studio and at home should be worried. Father, is that a worrying factor? That teachings such as the act of spiritual communion, sacrament,
the act of spiritual communion, to say that prayer in Kasimoya.
What's your take?
I think there are two issues here. There's the spiritual element and there's also the, the physical element, as it were. I think, firstly, depending on your understanding of or your take on the ecclesiology or different ecclesiologies that are existing, church, it's a community and we are relational beings. So I do understand when people say they miss church, because there's that void that has been created by being at home alone watching a screen, because then you are not in community. You are there alone as an individual, although you are joining virtually, as it were. But we are relational beings as human beings, and that nourishes us. That alone nourishes us, together with the communion or the sacraments that we receive in church. So the body and blood of Christ nourishes us, it makes us strong, but the community as well. So the community, remember the church, we are pilgrims. We are pilgrims as a church. So you cannot be journeying alone and feel strong.
Mm-hmm.
When you journey with others, you feel strong, you feel supported by that community that you're journeying with as pilgrimage. Many of us have been on a pilgrimage, and you know that on a pilgrimage you feel supported by those people that you're working with in that pilgrimage. So the aspect of community, the aspect of relationships, it's also nourishing, together with the sacraments that we receive at church. So the virtual Mass, although it nourishes, maybe you would find from the homilies and the readings, the homilies that break down and explain the readings, you do get some form of nourishment and spiritual growth. But there's that relationship, the relationship with the community, the rest of the community, that is missing. And so you cannot say, one, at least in many people, that nourishment, physical nourishment that you get from interacting with other community members it's missing in the ritual masses. And then when we get on the practical side of things, especially for a big headache for parish priests, I think we need to mention this as well, is that, you know, as a community, when we come together, we come together in this building called the church. Not the community, but the building itself. There are rates and taxes to be paid. That's a reality. And quite often in many communities, people are not into giving or, you know, doing the EFTs and all. So many parish priests have had headaches about how do I pay the rates and taxes, how do I, you know, the financial obligations of the church. And it is a thing. So, and as a community, you know, we have these obligations that we have to meet. Just like a family, as a family man, you know that I have to pay rent, I have to pay electricity, all these things, rates and taxes. It applies with the church as well. So if the community is scattered and is not coming together, some would do the EFTs and all that, but not all. And so the financial obligations of that particular parish, sometimes it's difficult for the parish priest to meet and to fulfill. So there's that challenge besides the spiritual. And we need to look at this whole COVID-19 pandemic globally, how it affects us, not only spiritually, but also there are these practical things that affect us as a church, and particularly the parish priest.
Parish priest. COVID has literally taken us to the first century, the early church, house churches. So you've always encouraged people to have small Christian communities where they could pray together in their homes. And today, that is now forced down everyone's throat. Are people connecting in their small Christian communities, or even as a family? How do you encourage people to gather and watch digitally or virtually compared to those that are able to come to the physical church?
Well, as I would say that every crisis presents an opportunity to either better yourself or to remain where you are or to go back. Now, during this time of COVID-19, obviously we had to resort to another model of being church, which is actually the most important aspect of being church. As Father was saying, a church is a community, but first of all, it is a community of persons, and it begins in their family. And that is actually how the early church began. You know, the apostles, as they were going out to proclaim, they were evangelizing and families, and they would celebrate and break bread in families, and the church grew to what it is today. But the important aspect of it is the domestic church, which actually this time of COVID-19 has actually opened room for us to go back to the basics, because it's not a new model. It's a model that even before COVID, I mean, some pastors, some priests were actually emphasizing that small Christian communities in some churches, they call them wards or zones. But obviously with COVID-19, you had to also take into precaution the social distancing, public gathering regulations and all that. But God will always provide. And what COVID-19 has shown, you know, the church is a visible sign of Christ in the world. That is why we say the church is a sacrament. It makes, you know, it makes present that which is invincible, because a sacrament is a material expression of an invincible reality into space and time. A sacrament brings that which is invincible, or a mystery, into space and time.
That sounded like some scientific theory. And we are on Faith Simplified. Father, please simplify
Yes, that's what I'm coming to. So the church is a visible sign of the presence of Christ, of the presence of God in the world. Christ is the head, we are the body, and the church exists in many forms. COVID-19 has challenged, you know, that community aspect of believers gathering together to worship. But it has also given an opportunity to go back to the basics, to the roots, domestic churches, which then will call into question, especially when you go to what I would call traditional or old parishes, where you still have your grandmothers, your grandfathers, abogogo and all that. You will see that the difference then, during this time of COVID, the more people who are vulnerable are the young people because of the foundations. Now, the grannies, for almost 8 years, they've been praying novenas, rosaries, even if there was no provision of social media channels like Radio Veritas, at least the elder would still maintain that aspect. But the young people, because the foundation had not yet been solidified,
some of the generation currently have not even experienced community service.
Exactly.
Where the priest is not there.
It's a shock. It's a shock. That's why in my parish, actually, during this time, I've always said, let us pay more attention to the young people. You know, because if the roots are not there, if the foundation is not solid, you easily lose them, especially during this time. Because, as you were saying, the digital aspect of it, it's not that much fulfilling. But nature does not support vacuum. If you close the churches, there is no longer public gatherings, there is no longer public worship. I mean, there's always providence. And we need to, I think we need to appreciate as well the efforts of, you know, technological development in terms of that. But does not mean it's a complete reality. It's not a permanent situation. And the real way of being church, as far as I say, is the contact, you know, the community aspect as relational beings. But in any crisis, it's like the Israelites, you know, at some point they found themselves in the desert. And they were thirsty for food, and God provided bread from heaven. You know, God will always provide. So I know the fear also it comes, will people come back to church? Well, but it's a time of crisis always opens up an opportunity, or it also teaches you something. Whether if someone does not come, it's a question of what did we catechize properly, or did the person appropriate well? Because in our parish we see as well, especially as far as I was saying about temporal issues, connections, you know, pledges, because I mean we still have to pay the bills. That's a practical and temporal aspect, because there's a physical aspect. But you see there are people who, when we are under normal circumstances, they want to be seen. They will donate a lot of money, but they want to be recognized. And then COVID has come, they have disappeared. But other people are emerging, and they don't want to be recognized. So God will always provide. I know the fear is there, but that aspect of providence should be there, and we should appreciate both physical and the digital aspect of it.
You at home and the ladies here in studio can probably attest. Father mentioned something that has to do with anxiety and living in the present. Does this not challenge you as faithfuls, as Christians, as believers in God, that this too shall pass? But the aspect of this too shall pass, is it practical in your lives? Do you connect to the church as much as you would, whether you are in the physical church or in a virtual church, or maybe listening on the radio? And how does that affect you, your day-to-day, in terms of your faith?
What I would say mostly, it goes back to how the faith was planted. So I'm not sure which father mentioned from the catechists, and knowing, okay, for a moment there I felt like I'm going back to, is it in book 1, book 2, it's like, okay, what is this? And all of that, it's like, yeah, it goes back there. Because even before COVID, when you mention youth, we've lost youth as a church. And especially because I would tell you, having been to a parish, you would find that a whole lot, their parents are not even actually Catholic. But you find in the morning, I'm going to mass and catechism. My friends around, they would come with me, and then we end up in a class together, we go through this and everything else. So coming back now to COVID, and everything else. In that way, we are losing those friends of mine which are youth, which were part of the church.
Do you share the same
It's
sentiments?
still going to be difficult. I think you asked something very important, that will this too pass? You know, so for me, the reality is it's not going to pass. You know, so we are in this in a period of.
Father, Father, you are right here.
No. Let me finish. So for me, the reality of the matter is we are in the digital age. You know, so it's not just a matter of the church. How we do work, it's digital. You know, so how we do school now, it's digital. Everything has gone the digital route. So for me, the question would be, would this be a consideration from the church to integrate the digital aspect of church? So, for instance, previously, if I missed Mass, I had committed a mortal sin, right? So if I didn't go to Mass on a Sunday, it's a mortal sin. Now, I can opt, because of the digital aspect of it, and we've recognized, and COVID has created a space to say, and the church has announced to say, no, stay home, be safe, listen to Mass digitally and all of those things. So we've participated in Mass digitally. Now that COVID, the laws get relaxed, do we now say this Mass, this digital Mass is not recognized? You know, so for me, it's the church has to decide and to make a decision around, do we recognize digital Mass as Mass? You know, because it's happening. And I think for me, Father also mentioned something around the business model of the church has been affected. You know, and for me, as a church, there needs to be an opportunity to now say, how do we innovatively come up with different solutions? One, we still need to feed our people spiritually, and we still need to feed our people and look after them, you know, but we need to find ways in which, and I think incentivize is the wrong word, but people give because there's something that they're receiving. So I would come to church because I get fulfilled, and as a result, my heart gets opened up to give whatever that I'm giving. But if I'm not in the presence of the church as I know it right now, a lot of people are asking themselves, why am I giving? But it doesn't take away your problem that because we have a building that we are maintaining, because we have people that we are employing that are here that we need to get paid, how do we still communicate the same language? How do we still communicate with our people to a way that we still feel that we are fed? You know, so for me, we can go the whole day.
Those are questions of the laity,
I think
and it comes back to you, gentlemen.
I think it's we shouldn't look at it as this too shall come to pass or it shall not pass. I mean, the reality is we are living with a new normal,
In the present.
From here moving forward, we are moving with the new normal. That's the reality. And so we need, how do you adapt this to this new normal that we're talking about? But I think going back to the question of, the validity of virtual mass or not, remember the reason why the churches were closed and other public gatherings, it was preservation of life. Yes. Preservation, otherwise, I mean, the church would have been irresponsible if they said, okay, no, let's meet, despite the virus, despite the pandemic. I mean, that would have been irresponsible. And fundamentally, preservation of life comes first. Even in the social teaching of the church, you know, when you talk of all these injustices, human rights, human dignity and all that, preservation of life take precedence. So we cannot gather to meet in a situation that we know that we're putting people's lives at risk.
Yes.
Because then we would be failing to preserve that. Because remember, that life is God who gives us the life, and we are stewards of God's creation. Everything that God created, including this life. So that is very important for people to remember that masses were not suspended because it was a good thing to do or because it's okay.
So okay.
Yeah, no.
Dispensation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There's a dispensation.
That's why I wanted to come in.
Yes, exactly.
On the dispensation part, to say under normal circumstances, Sunday there's an obligation, but there was an impossibility to gather. That is why the bishops, who gave that dispensation to say people are dispensed from that obligation, because otherwise it remains an obligation. But there's this situation that, as far as said, that is not allowing people to go. So it's a dispensation. Now, what does it mean? It means that if we are to open the churches and there is no threat to life or you as an individual, that is why we have not had any priest or any bishop forcing people to come back, even when the government said 50 people, because there's still that aspect of individual as of saying, I'm still fearing for my life. Now the dispensation remains. Now suppose then that we are back into normal circumstances and you want to listen to your radio veritas and you feel you don't want to go to church, then it challenges that, that because this is not the normal.
Preservation of life, dispensation, faith simplified. These are terms that you probably do not even pay attention to. What is dispensation? What is this blessing that the Pope gave recently and that allowed people not to go to confessions? And these are the issues that a whole lot of the laity found themselves not understanding. And this is where we try to unpack and simplify so that people can be able to explain to themselves, because there's an issue that was raised of moral obligation. So it's moral obligation versus preservation of life. And this, then what comes in is the dispensation. Is it still practical? Some people are up in arms, feeling that the church is a soft target. Why does government always pick the church? So then the church still has a role, because probably this is where the church had gone silent in terms of ensuring that their faithfuls do understand what is happening. And I think this is basically the challenge that most of our viewers are having at home.
Can I, Max, you've mentioned what the Pope has said, you've mentioned the Bishop, you've mentioned digital, which you prefer, and everything.
Which I don't prefer.
Is it all trickling down to the laity in the same level? Because I think from what the Pope has said to what a bishop would have read and made a decision, to what you would say as a parish priest, to a certain extent you need to simplify it so I can get to understand it, so that Ugogo can get to understand it. And since we are not going to Esondweni because we are preserving this life extended, how do we get the communication? As much as we are in a digital age, we are living in a society that is not in balance. Yes. We imagine, you've mentioned the rates and taxes that need to be paid and but a whole lot of people are losing their jobs. So
Prayer versus data.
Yes, which one am I going to go for?
You see, I think one of the important things that, and I think Pope Francis has been emphasizing and re-emphasizing during this time of the pandemic, was that, and we've seen it, what this pandemic did, it also exposed the fault lines. What do I mean? It has shown us that this society that we live in, this community of human beings, it's so unjustly divided, it's unequal. There are all sorts of injustices that put other people at a disadvantage, other people at an advantage. I mean, there's a phrase that was used, I can't remember who used this, but saying that, we are facing the same storm in different boats.
Yes.
Some boats are stronger than others, and the weaker ones, of course, yeah, exactly. So, there is that, this is slightly shifting us to the Catholic social teaching.
Well, that's where we should be going, because we are actually going to just ask our viewers to continue to comment on our social pages, subscribe and share and like, because that's basically, this was just to whet their appetite, and time has actually flown by, that we were here to just whet their appetite and to say that here's a platform that they can use, and a platform that would have information, because we give people an opportunity to learn, unlearn and relearn. Father spoke about the crisis and an opportunity to convert and to be creative. The business model of the church, information dissemination, looking towards the needs of the poor and those that cannot afford, those that have to think 1 gig or 1 loaf of bread. So we are sitting with these kind of challenges, and we are saying to you, you probably are sitting out there, you may have solutions, you may have further questions, but the church is actually availing itself through the clergy to say that they are not perfect, they are not experts, they did not live COVID life prior to it coming. So we are all in the same boat, yes, different types of boats, because a parish in the northern suburbs versus a parish in the informal settlement or an outstation that Father Bosham has in the East End are different. So are the lives of the people. So, Father, we are now going to wrap up, and by wrapping up, we will also be introducing to our viewers the next topic on the social teachings, the Catholic social teachings that we will be discussing in the upcoming week. So when you wrap up, please do give the viewers what to look out for, and we will also receive their comments and topics that they will bring forth, and the men of God are here, and they are here for you. So, Mashandu, since the time has just flown by, what are your closing comments and what do you expect from this show? Because basically this show is for you, and you at home, tell us what you would like to see happening, tell us what you'd like to hear us discussing, so that we can be able to bring it to you from the comfort of your home.
I think more than anything, if the show, okay, it is what? Faith Simplified?
Faith Simplified.
Yes. Just to simplify a lot of things, there is things that would be said at that altar, and what does that mean? And as much as we live the Catholic faith and our lives as taught according to the catechism, when you go out there, it's totally different. And there is also a need of fathers as our spiritual directors, but in most cases, even before COVID, they are there and we are here. So I think this accessibility, like via the platforms, would be great, because we'll be able to just get Malus. Yes.
You are the flock of
Yes.
of the good shepherds.
Yes.
Good shepherd. Here is a sheep that's almost getting lost. Leave the 99 and save this one.
We are still out searching for her. I mean, it's also important not to neglect a personal relationship with God, a personal relationship with Christ. I mean, even in time of crisis, in as much as we can speak about a church, we speak about community, digital, physical church and all that, faith remains a personal responsibility, especially when we are above the age of reason, when we have attained the age of reason. There's that is why even in the church, most of the things we say our, but when it comes to the profession of faith, we don't say siakolo. Everyone's I believe, I confess, which is an important aspect of faith. So let's keep the faith, and the faith will keep us. Let's not be tempted to seek for a church that moves with the world, but to seek for a church that moves the world.
Wow. Profound. Profound indeed. And it's your cue.
I think for me, what I appreciate about this platform and what I hope it will bring, it's just making sure that it humanizes the clergy, because to what Mashandi was saying is that there's the priest and then there's the rest of us, and there isn't that connection, so we never have a chance to engage on topics that affect us on a day-to-day basis. And I think for me, this platform provides that, and I hope it does provide that. We could literally have engaging conversations. I really enjoyed today's conversation to just let's unpack it, not from a scholastic perspective, but from a human perspective and from a real life perspective, so that we can carry some of the stuff that we're learning here, and people can really feel like our Catholic Church is accessible. Because right now, you guys seem to not be accessible. Sorry, fathers. but you seem ready to not be accessible. Like I really need to think deep. If I want to have a conversation with you, I need to think about how do I want to say it, when do I want to say it, and all of those things. But if I can feel like I can knock at your door and say, you know what, Father, I'm struggling with this particular aspect of the word, of scripture, or whatever it is, or of my life, you know, and I can believe that you'll have a conversation rather than have answers, but we'll have a conversation that could potentially help me to unpack some of the things that are happening in my life and to find the solutions and obviously connect with God. Not that, you know, so for me, I think I'm really excited about what the show could potentially bring.
Father?
Wow. Yeah, this is potentially a good show, and I think what really I would like to highlight myself as part of our faith, which I think many people are not aware of. I mean, let's just say, you think of any socio-economic, political problem or issue or injustice that you have experienced or you've read about. Do you know that the church has had a comment on that, and the church has given direction? You're talking about a shepherd. The church has shepherded its people. Everything from the beginning of the era of the Industrial Revolution in 1891 with Reverend Novarum, which kind of commemorated 130 years on the 15th of May this year. So from that period until now, the church has been commenting and guiding its people on how to react in those kind of situations. Recently, as in 5-6 years ago, Pope Francis came with this encyclical Laudato Si, which is about the care of our common home, as he puts it. And it's not only looking at the care of nature and all that, but it's looking at the issues, the economic injustices that lead people to destroy the environment, all those things, and how anthropocentric our lifestyles have been at the detriment of the environment, the biodiversity crisis that we're talking about, the climate crisis that we're talking about today. All those things, Pope Francis, he highlights them, and there's a call to conversion. So basically, in brief, the church has always been there. I spoke about a pilgrimage, has been journeying with the people since 1891 on these socio-economic and political issues, injustices. So those are some of the issues that maybe we need to unpack, and many people do not know about their faith.
Yeah.
You know, there's one Jesuit priest wrote a book called The Best Kept Secret, talking about the Catholic social teaching. And many people, they don't know that there is that richness in the church about social justice, economic issues, which we could tap on to deal with these challenges. So hopefully this program will also be looking at those things to help people negotiate their day-to-day lives. And the social teaching, it's not just ideas and ideologies. It's about preservation of human dignity, you know, with the belief that we are all created in the image of God, and from that comes the human dignity, and it's based on scripture. So it's and the faith. So it's a rich resource that could also help us to deal with our societal problems and challenges and injustices, as it were. So I look forward for us to discuss these and to unpack them as we go on.
What are we unpacking next week?
Let the Lord tell us.
I said introduce next week's topic. Well,
we can look at this. What is social teaching for starters?
Yeah.
What is just the general overview? What is it all about? What does it mean? You know.
There you have it. Social teachings. But I also like the engagement. I'd like to thank you for embracing us and responding to our call. And this is also to ensure that we give the people what they need. The gospel of the Lord says we do not ask for bread and He gives us stones, or ask for fish and He gives us snake. So you may be at home thinking to yourself, I've always had these questions, or I've always wanted to talk to a priest one-on-one. We have parishes that are very, very judgmental at times. I like what Clarissa spoke about when she said we need to humanize our priests. If Father is seen with Jabu discussing faith matters, we interpret them into something else. So we remove the humanity of our own priests, thus keeping them at a distance and chasing them away from reaching out to us and engaging with us. So we thank you very much for joining us this evening, and we ask you to join us on Sunday as well, when we will be discussing or unpacking the scriptures on Faith Simplified. Know it, love it, believe it, and live it. I thank you very much. May God bless you.
I think
Usho taka ile neno le Father, Father.